Hi, I'm Bill Senior.
And I'm Jay Burney, and welcome to another edition of Staying Connected. Today, we're going to be talking about plastics, in particular, single use plastics, which are a plague upon the world, a plague upon society, and a plague upon human health. Bill, why don't you tell us what you got going here with us today?
Well, we're old enough to remember going to see the movie The Graduate, and there's the line in it where the recent graduate, Dustin Hoffman, is at his graduation party, and some guy says to him, "I've got one word for you, plastics." And at that time, we weren't quite so inundated with plastics as we are today. Um, I've brought along some show and tell for basically useless plastic. It's part of our addiction to plastic. These little closures for bags of bread. They're not recyclable. I suppose they're sort of convenient, but they're really just throwaways. Also, this coffee stirrer from a well-known chain coffee shop. There we go. Um, it's single use, although we've kept this one so that it is multi-use. Um, and you can barely make out that there's a recycle symbol on the end of it. So at least nominally it is recyclable, but recyclable doesn't mean that it is recycled. In fact, worldwide, about 9% of the plastics that have been manufactured are actually recycled. And in the US, we do even worse. It's about 5% of the plastics for a variety of reasons. So this stuff is with us. It's not biodegradable. It's seldom recycled. And it's thrown away into the environment where it degrades and finds its way into the water, our drinking water, and by way of the drinking water into our bloodstream. About 80% of Americans have plastics in their bloodstream. So it's an environmental concern. It's a health concern, potentially at least. And we need to find a way to deal with all of this single-use plastic.
I mean, we're so dependent on plastics in every aspect of our lives, but particularly with food. When you go into the grocery store, plastics are wrapping everything. You go into a fast food restaurant or almost any restaurant, plastics are just part of the culture, and we're overwhelmed by it. And a couple of years ago, there was a movement to get rid of plastic straws and go to paper straws. And our new, federal administration, and one of the first executive orders from Trump was, let's get rid of paper straws and go back to plastic. We're not going in the right direction. What can we do?
There are, I suppose, simple things that we can do about some of it. That I, I don't use these stirrers because I put the cream in my coffee before I pour the coffee in, and I don't need to stir it. Um, but my not using plastic stirrers is not going to get us very far. Um, I'm not sure how we return to a situation where we're less dependent. I remember as a boy, uh, milk came in reusable bottles, and at least every week, sometimes more often than that, I would take a metal carrier with four quart bottles of milk and walk a mile or so to a dairy store where I would turn in the old bottles for reuse and would get four new ones to carry home. Um, I don't know why we don't do that anymore. And
Probably
it
because
is
of,
practically impossible to refuse plastic straws in a restaurant unless you say, I would like a glass of water, no straws, please.
I think the economy has worked to a point where it's cheaper to use plastics by far. I mean, it's the chemical petrochemical industry. Why don't we talk a little bit about, where this problem blows up in our faces? Let's talk about microplastics, nanoplastics. And I'm going to load up a little visual here. So give me a second to do that. Now, we live in the Great Lakes. You and I live in Buffalo, New York, which is on Lake Erie. This is the garbage dispersal in Lake Erie that comes from a lot of urban areas. All the water from the Great Lakes basically drains through Buffalo to the far right eastern end of Lake Erie. And these include microplastics. You see how they get spewed into the lake. It just fills up and it kind of filters down along the shorelines and down towards Buffalo. And to the far right, where Buffalo is where our water intake is too. We have some of the most dense microplastics concentrations in the world. Again, microplastics, everything from microbeads, a centimeter to nanoplastics, which are you can't even see with the human eye, never mind filter out of the water. And as you said earlier, Bill, so many humans have these microplastics now in their bloodstreams, and it also collects in our brains, and it collects in fish, it collects in wildlife, and so this is the stuff we're drinking, and it's a tragedy, and it could very well end up in the end of humanity if we don't figure out how to deal with it. So anyway, it just shows how assaulted we are by poisons in our environment. And I happen to think that the microplastics issue is probably the most challenging environmental disaster that we don't think about much. We're all ingesting it. And microplastics are found all over the globe, every continent. Antarctica, there's microplastics. I'm not going to say it's hopeless, but it's a tough challenge.
It's a very tough challenge. It's it's expensive to recycle the stuff, even if it's recyclable. Um, it's simply easier and cheaper to use new plastic. Um, and there's a consumer element to it. I know there's one brand of mayonnaise that puts the mayonnaise in recycled jars that are a bit cloudier than the new ones. And they have a little disclaimer on it saying that it's the same good mayonnaise. It's just that we're trying to be responsible and using recycled jars, recyclable plastics in our jars. So it may look a bit different to you. So I think part of the issue is that we've got to be a more educated group of consumers so that we can discern what really is important for us and our health and our environment, as opposed to what may look snazzier. And that also is a steep hill to climb.
One of the things I think we've all been schooled in terms of marketing and how why people buy things is that consumerism drives the marketplace, is what we've always heard. So if consumers are using it, and then it becomes more prevalent. That's what happened. Now, it's not just consumers. Obviously, industry, capitalist industry, messages that this is the right way to do it. This is the best way to do it. This is the cheapest way to do it. And so we get manipulated by marketing and advertising. And I think that as consumers, we can probably stand up to this. We got that straw paper, whatever they're called. I can't think of them now. uh, straws, paper straws. And it worked. It worked in California. It worked in other places until the new administration came along and crushed all of our environmental hopes and dreams. Listen, I think it's about time to wrap up. Do you have anything else you want to say about it? I've got one little wrap up piece.
I, I don't really have, I wish I had some better suggestions for solutions, and it's a shame to end on a down note. But I think that's where we are at the present, and we have to revisit this topic later on in the series.
Well, never give up hope. We have recycling programs. They're not working very well in the city, in the county, anywhere in the world. It has a lot to do with the industry. Industry has to make it, worth their while economically. I want to say one thing about The Graduate. You brought that up in the very beginning. When I was a young man, and I'm talking about a teenager, I went to see The Graduate. I was looking for the seduction scenes, and that's what was advertised. I wanted to see that stuff. Uh, but that plastics comment grabbed my mind, and I've held on to that ever since. And so it was a very powerful message that came out of that kind of neat movie.
Yeah.
Um, well, listen,
Well, I think we've got to keep remembering that we should refuse, reuse, and recycle um, as far as plastics are concerned. And we'll take up the topic
here,
down the road.
here's a funny anecdote. Years ago, I used to work in the City of Buffalo recycling program, the County of Erie recycling program, and we talked the city into putting a little logo on the side of their garbage trucks, refuse recycling. Um, what it looked like was refuse recycling, and it took us 2 years to get that logo off those trucks. And oh my God! But life goes on. Uh, Nice to see you.
To
We'll
see
talk
you.
talk to you again soon, and let's hope we get through this week.
I We will indeed.
Thank you. See you all next time.
Yep. Bye now.